Hi, I'm Matthew Gorley, Communications Coordinator for the Saskatchewan Sports Hall of Fame, and welcome to this Women in Sport panel discussion. Today, we're really pleased to be welcomed by Daniella Ponticelli from Global Television and Catriona Le May Doan, an honored member of the Saskatchewan Sports Hall of Fame. I'm sure I don't need to tell everyone about Catriona's accomplishments, but I'm going to anyway. She's a three-time Olympic medalist, 2 gold medals back-to-back in the 500 meters. She also won 11, I believe, world championship medals, including 5 gold. She broke the world record and the Olympic record in the 500 meters. She's an officer of the Order of Canada. She's in Canada's Sports Hall of Fame. I could go on. She's a 2-time Canada flag bearer. So the list of accomplishments are quite deep and well-earned. And she's currently the president and CEO of Sport Calgary. So I'll let Daniella take over and begin the conversation with Catriona.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Catriona, for joining me today. Your accomplishments are beyond impressive. You're not only a force in the speed skating world, but you have also carved out a career in sports that I definitely want to get to in just a little bit. But first, I want to start where this all began. 9 years old, skating with the Saskatoon Lions Speed Skating Club. Tell me about those early years. What do you remember most?
What do I remember? I remember being really, really cold. Anybody who has skated outside in the prairie provinces, you understand what I'm talking about. And, you know, my parents are both straight from Scotland. So it's not like skating was sort of, you know, anything that they knew about. But I'm the youngest of 3 girls. My middle sister had seen an advertisement and she started, and I said, okay, well, I'm going to follow what my sister's doing. And so I joined the club as well, and we skated together for, I think, about 8 years. But, you know, I remember going out to Clarence Downey Oval, and really it was cold. I mean, we would layer on so many pairs of long underwear, and we would put, you know, the fact that as a little kid, you knew that to put Vaseline on exposed skin because that would stop frostbite. But there's a certain sound of a blade on a super cold piece of ice. And when it's really still, and when I hear that, I think about skating outdoor at Clarence Downey Oval, and it brings back great memories. As much as they were cold memories, they were great.
Some very frigid memories. Yeah, there's nothing like winter sports on the prairies. Now, you really grew up with your sport. The first 10 years as a speed skater included your teenage years. How did you navigate the highs of success during that time and some of the setbacks as well as a young athlete?
You know, it's interesting because as much as speed skating is an individual sport, there's such a team atmosphere, and we had such a great group as a part of our club. And, you know, we would go out training and you didn't miss other stuff. I mean, I tell athletes nowadays, you know, just in a sport like speed skating, there are a couple of different sports where you need to sort of really relocate perhaps at a younger age. But I always say, finish out your high school like in your hometown with your family, because I just found that, you know, I loved my high school and I could still be a part of high school, have my core group of friends. And, you know, we would go to the school dance, but it wasn't like we were out all the time because I had sport. And so it was a huge part of my life. It wasn't my entire life, but it was a huge part of it. And when I think about the experiences that I had as a teenager, I got to go to 2 Canada Games, and I'm going to actually point out my jacket because this was our jacket in 1983 Canada Games for Team Sask. So I was 12 years old and I got to go to the games with my sister. But, you know, you get that real sense of, you know, team, but also accomplishment, being able to do something like that, to go to, you know, to go on a plane and to go to a big competition. And so, you know, it's not like you're missing out. People often use a word sacrifice, especially at teenage years or whatever years. I don't like the word sacrifice because I got to do certain things, and there were certain things that I wasn't around to do. But, you know, great years being a part of the club. And even when I was on the national team, I was still part of Saskatoon Lions Speed Skating Club. So as much as I left Saskatoon physically, I really, truly never left my club.
And I also would love for you to show the length of the sleeves on that, please. That was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, it's very short. So yes, it does fit me, but yeah, I have really long arms and I definitely grew from the time I was 12. But you know what? I wear this at different Canada Games still nowadays, especially if it's Saskatchewan Day or Saskatchewan Night, because I'm sure proud that I was able to represent Team Sask at Canada Games.
And honestly, the retro look will never go out of style. So
Exactly.
you're always
That's what I think.
solid in that department. So I guess, I mean, now that you've been able to reflect on that sort of the younger years, how did being an athlete impact your sense of determination and your work ethic, both in your youth and then now as you develop into your career that's still going on today?
You know, my parents, our parents raised us to be, to not worry ever about being the best, but about being your best. And so they've always focused on a very strong work ethic. And my mom always emphasized, never judge people by what they accomplish. Not even judge them, but hard work is what really defines people. So we've always been very hard workers. We had, throughout my years, I definitely had some successes and some setbacks also. But, just the fact of where I was raised and the values that were put on me, for sure, that's what got me through a long career, 23 years of going around and around an oval, and then still involved in sport because it's what I'm passionate about. And again, it's not just about people being at the very top, it's about seeing that people can accomplish their goals and be their best. And that's what really gets me excited. And so it did as an athlete. And, I was fortunate to have tons of people support me, but I continue to be passionate about that today. And those are the values that I try to pass on to my kids.
And you're also now the CEO of Sport Calgary. So we're seeing that you're also influencing other young people other than your kids. And you're right there in the grassroots of growing that sport participation for girls and women. What do you see as the challenges, though, for girls as they age up through sports?
Right now, the biggest challenge for sport is COVID. And I think the biggest thing, and this is what I hope we remember, is that when sport was taken away from all of us back in March, people's seasons didn't necessarily start. People's seasons didn't necessarily finish. And again, I'm talking from high performance all the way to community level sport. And when you take that away and you isolate people, you first of all miss the physical side, and then you miss the social side. And now we're seeing the results on that mental side. And so we have to remember that sport is key for recovery from isolation. Sport is key for all of us at any level, sport and physical activity. So again, I don't necessarily put sport under the umbrella of being just organized sport, but it's about being active. And so we need to make sure that we don't lose touch with sport, because I'm dealing with a lot of sport organizations, and most are run by volunteers. There are very few that are run by paid staff. But, we're running into people didn't have registration fees. Then all of the fundraising has been tough and sponsorship is tough. And then what's happening now, I think, across the country is that people don't have a facility because facilities aren't necessarily fully open and renting to sport groups. So it's been very tough, but through it all, sport can bring us together. It brings people together, whether we're talking Olympic, Paralympic level, whether we're talking community. And we have to continue to fight for sport, because sport is often put aside as an extra. Sport is key to every single one of our communities. And so that's what that's what I've always believed, and that's what I see. And so it's even more of a struggle when we talk about women and girls in sport, because we look at the mentors. And one of my biggest things is when somebody says, oh, thank you. You know, I have a young daughter, and my daughter right now is 16. So I love when there are females that they can look up to. But then you look at the coaching side, and we don't have a ton of female coaches. And so who are these young girls looking towards as mentors if they want to become a coach? So the biggest thing is to have those mentors available. And then it's to make sure that the pressures of the community, you know, often I hear girls say it on my daughter's ringette team, oh, you know, my legs are getting so big and my arms are so strong. And I'm like, oh, that's beautiful. It's amazing. And my daughter is so strong. And she often is sitting there going, oh no. I said, Greta, look at your mom and look at me 20 years ago. And I love that. And so I think it's important that we continue to listen to the young girls around us and continue to embrace the fact that we're all built differently, that we all have different strengths, that we need to keep them engaged in sport. And so what is that going to mean? Is that going to mean taking some time off for school? Is that going to mean taking some time off? Yeah, you don't have to be at practice because you know what? Your friends are having this get together and you really want to go there. So there are certain things where we really have to be aware, but we need to make sure those girls and young women stay involved in sport because we need them to then one day be the mentors for the next generation.
And you touch on an amazing point about that outside opinion. And so I'm wondering, how much did outside opinions affect you? And we're talking friends, family, media, of course, in both a positive and a negative way.
You know, I guess this is unfortunate, but I probably had to learn to get some pretty thick skin. But now, I mean, I'm about to turn 50 and I'm embracing that. And I will say whatever, because I realize that I'm okay with who I am. I am not perfect, but as a young teenager, for sure, it's pretty intimidating to be building these big muscles, and especially a sport like speed skating. I mean, you build these big leg muscles. And then into my 20s, I started to really embrace that because it was the beauty side of it. But we have to learn and get the right wording and get the right language. That it's amazing. I mean, it's amazing if a young girl is out doing a sport and she's whatever size she is and whatever build she is, we embrace it. To me, it's the people being active, you know, and that's what we have to get to. And we have to make sure that that parents are educated in language, that coaches are educated, that community is educated. And so it all comes down to, I believe, just that education side and that resilience of the athlete as well. And I think that is now what we're finding is that athletes can have a voice, and it's okay to say this isn't right. And you know, I work a lot with the Respect Group and Sheldon Kennedy, the organization that he created. And there are a lot of programs now where athletes need to find a voice. So whatever it is, athletes need to have a voice, coaches need to have a voice, and parents need to have a voice, but we need to make sure that those outside voices use the right language. And that's all about education.
And now we're also in a world that includes social media. So that's a whole extra, you know, challenge, especially I'm going to obviously bring it back to the discussion around girls, young women, especially in a world where it seems like instantly you need to be able to grasp things. And as an athlete, you know this, there's so many things you don't get right away. What do you see? Is that a potential challenge that's facing all of our young athletes at this time?
You know, I'm not envious of these teenagers with social media and with phones. And my daughter's a little bit of an old soul, and she doesn't always love it either. And you know, I'm on social media a lot now, and I love it to be able to catch up on stuff, to be able to share things. But from that side, that pressure side, I think it can be very dangerous. And again, it's about education. It's educating what's okay and what's not okay. And it's educating young women and girls to, again, have that voice, to be okay to say, you know what, I'm good with who I am. Oh, and you know what, none of us are perfect. You know, and I continue to say that to my kids. I'm not perfect. They're not perfect. But it's okay to say, you know, this is me. And if somebody, let's say social media, if somebody says something, I mean, that situation you have to walk away from. But there's pressure for sure for them. But it's finding, and I think that sometimes where sport can give you that core team is finding that safe network of people who you can be just who you are, and it's okay. And what I've learned through my work, and especially through COVID and people in isolation, and a lot of people had been talking about, oh, well, kids are with their families. Well, one of the Calgary City Councillors brought up that, well, that's not always the safest environment. And so for especially young girls young girls in general, finding that core group of people who you are safe with. And when I mean safe, it's who you can be yourself. And that doesn't necessarily mean parents or sibling, but finding those people, that is key. That really is important.
So shifting gears a little bit, moving back to some of your accomplishments, being an athlete is part of your identity. So what happens when you shift from that to being an Olympic athlete and then being a medal winning Olympic athlete? How did that change things for you, or did it? Or were you able to kind of navigate that path well, given the good influences and the strong friends and family that you had around you?
I think exactly what you said about the good influence of friends and family, because I think at first I probably thought that if I accomplish something, then I'm more important or I'm a better person. And it's really hard for people, everybody has goals, and it's hard for people to really separate the identity with what you do. But I think every once in a while, everybody needs a little bit of a check. If you take away what you do, who are you as a person? And for me, that was really in 1994 when I fell at the Olympics, because I'd wanted to win a medal. I was ranked 5th in the world. So it was a realistic goal. And to fall and be last, you really get a bit of a reality check on who cares for you and why, and how do you define yourself? So it comes down to values. And what I realize is that regardless of results, I never changed as a person. And that's why I refuse to ever let titles or status or anything define anybody that I meet. I want to know the person. I want to know why they're doing what they're doing, not exactly what they're doing or what they've accomplished. And so I continue to carry that throughout my life. I mean, people have an expectation of me. And when I've met people lately, they're like, oh, you're very different than I expected. And I've gotten very used to that. And, and it's okay. And I guess I take it as a compliment because they're like, no, in a good way. But I'm thinking, man, what did you expect?
I was just going to ask, what did they expect? Have you figured that out?
People expect me to be super uptight, and okay, if I say I'm relaxed, some of my good friends will be like, really? But I don't expect anybody to be perfect. I'm not. I love going out and playing my old lady ringette, and this year I can only do ringette, not hockey. I'm competitive to a point, but I'm not competitive. People thought I would be super rigid and everything, and I am not that way. I have dogs walking in my house, people walking in and out, and it's just I'm way more relaxed than people expect. But people have this expectation, and I've been told this many years ago, that an Olympic athlete, especially a gold medal winning Olympic athlete, they expect them to be perfect. So when they meet somebody and their life isn't perfect, they're very shocked. And I had to come to terms with that there are going to be mess ups in my life, and whether it's work, whether it's personal life, whatever. And I had to be okay with it. And then I've kind of had to be okay with other people's expectations, like, oh, you're not perfect. So it's been tough, and that's a little bit of my skin is pretty thick. And you know what, I will share whatever with anybody now, because I figure if I can help anyone to navigate that route. And again, not just in sport, there's so many parallels with sport and business, whatever it might be that people are working to accomplish in their lives.
Well, and that's going to take me actually to the topic of mental health, which of course is very important and something that is being discussed on that athlete level, but also with coaches and just that interaction between the two. What do you feel has really changed, perhaps in the conversation, but also in the actual implementation of, mental health check-ins and making sure that our athletes are doing okay?
I think we've taken a bit of a turn, but more recently, and I think people are talking like we took a turn a while ago. I think we were talking, but people weren't ready to receive. And people didn't know what to do. And, there's one thing about, talking mental health, but then are we really talking about what happened? Like, we all struggle, and that's okay to talk about, but, are we having the full on conversations? And it was interesting because not long ago, I held a webinar and I had two members of the Humboldt Broncos team. And to hear it from young guys in their 20s who Tyler Smith has no, what you would say is no sort of visible injuries. And then Ryan Strasniski. So I was chatting with both of them, and it was interesting from their perspective and how they started to come to terms to take care of themselves. And so I think that's the big thing, is that we're all of a sudden saying it's okay to have to take time for yourself. And I think COVID has really taught us that as well. And, for me, I've always been somebody who, I'm not artificial one single bit, and I love life, but people won't often see the sort of super emotional side, and I'm super emotional, or the times I really struggle, because I don't necessarily post that, but what I post isn't fake. But, people know struggles that I've had, especially recently. I mean, I had a marriage breakdown, and that's not an easy thing to deal with when you have teenage kids. So to still sort of be in a public life and to have to deal with that, put it a little bit of an added pressure, but I also sort of embraced it, because it's like, this is me, I'm okay. And I don't have a great day every single day, and that's all right. So in a way, it's, to me, we all have a journey, and you're going to help people along the way, and others are going to help you. And so, things are put in our path that we can deal with. That's what I believe. And so, this is part of my journey, and I'm fine to talk to people about absolutely anything and never judge them and expect the same in reverse. So, it's been interesting with teenage kids, being able to talk to them. And my daughter's firstborn, quite, a perfectionist, quite high anxiety. And so it's been interesting because she shows it more. I never showed it as much. And so it's neat to see the two different ways of dealing. And now I look for that. I look for that if I'm helping on a bench, if I see it in other people. And so I think we're talking about it more. And my biggest advice would be, let's stop judging. Let's stop judging each other. Let's stop judging ourselves.
If I unmuted myself, you would have heard me say, wow, because that was a really great way to put it. And the fact that we are all in this together, whether we are mentors or athletes ourselves. And on that mentor front, I know you mentioned earlier in our discussion that we need more women to take on those roles. What do you think is the big challenge? Is it because they don't see themselves already represented there?
I'm gonna even broaden it outside of women and girls in sport and mentors and just mentors in general, because I would say that, you want to be able to see people, like, again, that coaching side. But again, you could see somebody in a business position and go, okay, I want to be a coach and be a leader just like that person. But I think there are a few things that hold women and girls back. And I think we're very slowly taking baby steps, but we're not where we should be. And it's the fact that I don't think we always see people in that position. There are a lot of, and fair or not, but as a female, if you want to have children, there are different pressures on you, from yourself to with kids, from community. and socially. There are pressures for sure, different than on men. And I don't think that we have, if people disagree, I don't think we have moved past that yet. But it's also the fact that, when I look at somebody with my work, Sport Calgary, my chair is Mary Moran. She's the president and CEO of Calgary Economic Development. And a few months ago, when I took over as CEO of Sport Calgary a year ago, I had a meeting with her a few months later, and I said something, and she goes, "Oh, everybody thinks that I'm just a tyrant." And I said, "Why?" And, she says, "I'm a go-getter, I'm all this." And it really hit me. And I said to her, "So would people say the same thing if you were a man?" And she paused for a second and said, "Probably not." And I said, "Okay, then we as women have to stop seeing ourselves as that. We can be go-getters. We can be head of organizations. We can be the best in the world at something. We can be the best in our community at something. And that's not a bad thing." And so I think, again, that's where it comes back to that judgment side. Let's cheer each other on. Let's not have competition within each other, within females and women and girls. Let's really embrace it and encourage and inspire each other.
Because so much of sports coverage is largely centered around men, whether that's male coaches, whether that's male sports teams or individual male accomplishments, what would your advice be, though, for girls who are trying to navigate their own paths that are kind of largely unseen in mainstream media right now?
It's tough because it's true. A lot of the media is mainly men focused. There was a stat, and I think it was back from 2004, and it was something like 4% of all sport coverage was female. I believe it was 2000. No, that was in 2014, and it included the Sochi Olympics. So it's pretty shocking, and that wasn't that long ago. And there are sports out there, and it's an organization like Sport Calgary or all these local sport organizations, and they really have a variety of sports. It's not necessarily about getting on TV. As we know, a lot of sports, amateur sport nowadays, is not seen that much on TV. A lot of it is online. But I think the biggest thing is when you hear of something that intrigues you, investigate it. It takes a little bit of work. And that's, I think, where people are busy and people are just exhausted emotionally, physically. And so sometimes people don't want to do that little bit of extra work. But if there's something that you've heard of, a sport, a group, anything like that, investigate. Because through my work, I've learned of sports and groups I never knew existed. I had to look up what some of these sports were. And it's super exciting because there's something for everybody. So I truly just encourage, young girls and females, if they want to get involved in something, even if it's mainly male oriented, it's okay to try that as well. And so it's having a bit of courage and, just having that drive and saying, I want to do it, I want to try it, and then being proud of the effort.
And that kind of brings me as well to the topic of equity in sports, which we know is important. And it's been a topic, I don't even want to say it's been a topic in this year's meeting. It's every year. This is an important discussion that continues, and it's largely driven by the people who are affected. So aside from measures such as equal pay, what other changes are needed that could create more equitable opportunities for girls, young women, also marginalized groups as well?
We've started to really have the discussion about even board members and women on boards, and that's starting. And that then you look at that coaching side and the opportunities for coaching. And I'll go back to Canada Games. I mean, there are some great programs where women who have recently had children are able to go and still continue to coach and have somebody there and help them. So there are opportunities, but we need to continue to make sure that we talk about that we need to build that database of female coaches so that when girls are done in sport, or if they don't even want to participate, but if all of a sudden they want to be a leader and a mentor and a coach, that there's that opportunity. Then we look at, then there's that pay side for the sports where they are paid. But in general, I would say most sport is you're not going to get a paycheck. And so that's not necessarily what drives people finally, but it's taken many, many years, are the different sport opportunities. I mean, if we look at boxing, finally female boxing became an Olympic sport, but how long had male boxing been in and not female? And so we are moving forward, but again, it's too slow. It's too slow. And so we need to continue to have the voice. We've had some great, and I'm looking federally, some great leaders within the sport community from the government level who have pushed that. But we need to continue to do that. And so that's up to each one of us to push the buttons, to bug our MLAs, to bug our MPs, to continue to have that conversation and to continue to investigate, what opportunities are there not there for females that are there for males? Because I don't know if everybody's always aware of it. And so we need to continue, again, it's education, it's educating ourselves, but then it's having that courage side, because it's pretty intimidating, to stir things up a little bit. But I think sometimes we're going to need to.
And on that note, I want to thank you, Catriona, for joining me today, having this discussion. I so appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
And thank you to the Saskatchewan Sports Hall of Fame as well for hosting this discussion. And thank you for joining us and taking part as well.